Hello, everyone. My name is Gil Penalosa, and this is Cities for Everyone, the webinar, where every other week I invite fascinating people to share their story, their experiences, and knowledge so that all of us can become better at being passionate advocates on what? On anything that will contribute to create cities that are more equitable, sustainable, and fun. Originally, I'm from Bogota, Colombia, where I led the construction of over 200 parks. And I also took a small program of open streets, Ciclovia, and turned it into the world's largest pop-up park, where every Sunday over 1.5 million people come out to walk and bike and skate. But now I live in Toronto, Canada, where 20 years ago I created 880 Cities, a nonprofit, and I've been working in many places. I've been fortunate to have worked in over 350 cities. And this is a way of giving back. So this is free, always free, and hopefully always interesting. Today, we have a fascinating guest who's going to talk about inclusive transportation, Veronica Davis. Veronica, welcome. We are so eager. We have hundreds and hundreds of people. It's almost completely full. And why is it? Not because they want to hear me, they want to hear you. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your presentation. Welcome, Veronica.
Thank you. Good morning. Happy New Year, everyone. I'm excited to present and be part of this conversation with you, Gil.
So, Gil, I do include my intro as part of my slide presentation, but just very briefly, my name is Veronica Davis. I am the Director of Cities at Atkins Realis. I am currently sitting in Washington, D.C. at Transportation Research Board. And for the non-transportation people, it's like the nerd conference for our industry, academia, practitioners, city government officials from around the world are here to discuss, to talk about transportation and new research. So with that, Gil, if I can go ahead and share my screen. So as mentioned, I wrote a book. It came out in July 2023, Inclusive Transportation, a Manifesto for Repairing Divided Communities. So what I'm going to do in this morning's talk is just give a little bit, just a little taste of what's in the book. On the slide is also how I can be reached. I'm veronica.davis at atkinsrealis.com. On the social medias, I'm Veronica O. Davis, and then my personal website is veronicao.com. So Gil asked to talk a little bit about me, but what I like to do is talk about me in the framework of where I'm from and the things that I've seen, just to give a sense of who's talking, who you're talking to. Because I think bios you can find online, where I went to school. I know Gil mentioned Duke and NC State, and I'm over here like, because I went to University of Maryland, and we used to be in the same basketball conference, and University of Maryland's the better team, but I'll let Gil sit with that through Q&A. But this is a photo of where I'm from in Maplewood, New Jersey. For those, and probably most people have no idea where Maplewood is, it is a small suburban community right outside of New York City. So there is a train that will take you right to Midtown Manhattan. Many of our parents growing up worked in New York City. We were very much a bedroom community, but it was a very walkable community. And I love this presentation to show the speed limit, 15 miles per hour. And I remember growing up, being young and walking with my friends to go get ice cream because it was a safe place to be from a traffic related perspective. And it shapes a lot of who I am and what I think about safety. I think sometimes we say safety and people have different ideas what that mean. For me, my standard for safety is that an 8-year-old child should be able to navigate independently without worrying about being struck, and definitely not worrying about being killed or seriously injured from a traffic related injury. And so that is all formulated by where I grew up. And just for some context, if you've ever heard of Lauryn Hill, who had a really great hip hop album, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, she's from my high school. For the younger crowd. SZA, who is an artist out there now, she also went to my high school. So that's Maplewood, New Jersey. Previously, I was the director of transportation and drainage operations for the city of Houston. Last year, around this time, I stepped down from that position because we had a change of administration, and it was understood that you work for the administration, and the new administration had different ideas for how they want to see Houston. But I have this up there because I'm actually very proud of the work that I did at my time at the city of Houston. The fact that we were able to implement bike infrastructure and not just in the downtown areas, but truly serving communities, particularly Black and Brown communities, lower income communities. That is where we were able to get safe, protected bicycle infrastructure so that kids can be able to get to school, that people can be able to get to work, or people could just even use it for leisure. Some of the other things that we did, we brought in right over $200 million of federal money that is going to go directly to low income communities. The federal government calls them areas of persistent poverty. So those are the areas that typically in every city, I'm sure that you have some in yours, where there never seems to be any type of infrastructure investment. So we brought in that money, and it's going to be invested in those communities to meet their needs. And whether it's something as simple as a sidewalk, or whether it is something more dramatic, such as grade separation, there's a lot of rail in the city of Houston, and so the trains sometimes stop on their at grade crossings. So the road crosses the railroad at grade. And so getting some of those separations so that people can continue to get to school, emergency services can serve people. Now I'm at Atkins Realis. I am the director of cities. And a lot of what I'm doing is bringing this holistic thinking to our work. We know that infrastructure is really the thing that we all need and for cities to thrive. Gil talked about 880 cities. So transportation is one aspect, but we also need clean water to drink. We need a way to manage our sanitary water, our sewer systems, such that we can recycle and have that water go back into nature and be cleaned. So that's what I do, is just bring that level of thinking and making sure we're always thinking about people. As an engineer, my profession doesn't exist unless it's about people. So how are we serving people? How are we making communities better now and in the future? This is me. So I took some time off in between the city of Houston and working at Atkins Realis. And I spent a lot of time walking around my community. And one of the things I realized is how much, particularly for me, as someone who works in an office or works in front of a computer all day, the importance of being able to get outside, whether you walk, whether you're using a wheelchair and mobility aid, really just the importance of getting outside. And what does outside need? We need places to walk. We need shade. I will tell you, in Houston, it was extremely hot. And so you need some level of shade to help cool things down. As For some people, they might need a place to sit and take a rest. People need bathrooms. People need drinking water. So those are things I thought about as I was walking around during my short sabbatical. This is a picture that I also have talking about my time at the city of Houston. And I think often when people think about my work at the city, they think about the bike lanes, which were awesome, and some of the big projects. But really, the part that I loved was working with my frontline staff. I had over 700 frontline staff that were responsible for maintaining the roads, the traffic signals, the drainage system. Even now, as I sit in DC and it's snowing, and I have the ability to have the comfort to sit in my hotel, many people had to leave their homes to make sure that the roadways were plowed and make sure that the sidewalks were cleared. And I think, especially with inclusive transportation, one of the things I grapple with is equity. And I have this slide in here because sometimes with equity, we tend to look external. We tend to think about the communities we serve. And that is absolutely important. And that is what is going to be the focus of a lot of my talk today. But I have this slide as a reminder to also think about internal equity. as you have staff, how are you ensuring that you're uplifting your staff members? When I was at Public Works, it was very easy for people to get about frontline staff in decision making and in policies. But for me, I always centered the staff, particularly as they always had to show up, even during COVID, where the office staff could work from home. The frontline staff still had to show up every day, even with all the risk of exposure to COVID. And unfortunately, during my time at the city of Houston, I did have to go to many funerals, almost all frontline staff for various things. Some of it was COVID related, some of it was just other health issues. And so I have this just as a reminder for those of you on this call, particularly that work for government, don't forget about your frontline staff and how you can uplift their work and making sure that you are pouring into them both as career professionals, that they're getting the training that they need as well. So why I do what I do, as Gil talked about, we know that people are dying, and this is, in the United States, this is what this stat is from: 44,000 motor vehicle related deaths in 2023, and this is a bike of one of my friends who was struck and killed on April 19th, 2019. And it's a reminder of what I do, because it's not just about 44,000 people that didn't return home, but it's about all the people that miss them. It's about their friends, their families, their colleagues. It's the emergency workers that had to respond to the incident and their impact. And we really need to be doing more in the United States and then internationally to make sure that we are doing everything we can to prevent these fatalities, particularly since we know they are preventable. So I know for the transportation people have seen some iteration of this graphic from the Institute of Transportation Engineers. For the non-transportation people, what this graphic is trying to convey is speed limits. So at 20 miles per hour, 30 miles per hour, and 40 miles per hour, that is what is on the left-hand side. And so with the speed limit, the blue is a person survives the collision, and red results in fatalities. So at 20 miles per hour, 90% of people will survive the crash, about 10% won't. At 30 miles per hour, it drops to 60% will survive the collision. And at 40 miles per hour, it drops to 20%. The challenge, I know that many of us have been talking about with this graphic, is that this is based on a person driving a sedan, for just a standard car, where you're striking, particularly an adult, at their legs, at their knees, in which case they will likely roll on top of the hood. However, and I can definitely say in the United States, we have big vehicles. We have SUVs. In Texas, everything is bigger in Texas, and Texas has their own special edition of certain vehicles. And so now you're striking people at vital organs. And so we are seeing that pedestrian deaths are continuing to climb. And what I think about this, so in my book, I tackle stakeholders. On the bottom, it's just a chart where I try to just talk about power and influence. But in my book, I talk about four stakeholders: people in power, champions and naysayers, and the silently suffering. So the people in power, those are your elected officials. Those are your heads of departments. For me, at my time at the city of Houston, I sat in a seat of power where I had a lot of power to make decisions, and I had a lot of influence for the decisions that I had to elevate up to the mayor or others. So those are people in power. And that is always going to be a key stakeholder of who do they listen to. And particularly for those of you that work for government or consulting, you have a lot of influence over the people in power, because you are people in power. You are the ones that are doing the analysis. You are the ones that are presenting to the people in the power the decision that they should be making. So you do. I hope that coming away from this conversation, you think about the power and the influence that you do have, and how to present that information to the decision makers. In the middle, I have the champions and the naysayers. These are the people that are going to be passionately for or against your project. It doesn't matter what the project is, whether it's transportation, housing, park. We know that if we hold a public meeting, who is going to show up? It's the advocates, it's the people who just don't want. And that box, their power and influence can vary. It depends on a lot of context, which is why I made it so big. And I know that the groups don't like to be linked together, but they really are. They are the people who know how to navigate the system. They're the people who have organized and have the time and the ability to attend meetings or to send an email and know how things work. But in the corner, is a group that I call the silently suffering. Those are people with low power and low influence, and every community has them. They're not showing up to the public meeting. And it's not that what you have to say isn't important. They're just trying to get through the next 24 hours. And once they get through that 24 hours, they're trying to get through the next 24 hours. There are people who may be working multiple jobs. They may be people who are working shifts so that you have your public meeting in the evening. That is when they're going to work. And oftentimes, we don't think about this group because they're not engaged in the process, nor do we make an effort to engage in the process. So I have some photos to talk a little bit about what the silently suffering look like. So this is from Tucson, Arizona. It's a bus stop. In the United States, if you see a road like this, it is likely on what we call the high injury network. It's the roads where people are dying and being seriously injured. And there's a sidewalk, sure, but there's a bus stop. And here's a person waiting at the bus stop for their child to get off. So you have children walking along this very dangerous road that is 5 lanes. There is a bike lane that no one would use because it's really more of a gutter pan. You do have sidewalks, but they're right against the road. And this is what I mean about the silently suffering. How are we engaging the this population as we are making decisions about the future? This is a photo from the city of Houston. In the city of Houston, and this isn't typical for all US cities, but in Houston, the abutting property owner is responsible for the installation and maintenance of sidewalks. So, what we see in Houston is some of the older parts of Houston have sidewalks. They may have various levels of repair need. But then you have areas like this part of Houston, which is on the southeast side, where there are no sidewalks. Because of drainage, it is very expensive to install a sidewalk. And this is one of the lower income neighborhoods. And the end result is this woman in a wheelchair and a person behind them, if you can see in the background, a person walking with a child in the roadway because there are no sidewalks. And this is what I mean by the silently suffering. This is a photo from Rockville, Maryland. And this is what we would consider a complete street, right? And so it has a complete street is a street that accommodates all modes. So this has a nice wide sidewalk for people to walk. It has multiple lanes. It does serve transit on this particular route. But even when we see a street like this, we know that people are still being struck and killed, likely pedestrians. And part of the challenge with a street like this, particularly in the United States, is the buses often only run every 30, maybe 45 minutes. And so what happens is that someone might be walking to catch their bus and they see it and they dash across the street because they're just trying to catch that bus. They don't want to wait for the next bus because often there are conditions where they can't sit or there's no shade, there's no bus shelter. So they're trying to make the bus. And that is when they are struck and killed. Or even if people aren't trying to make the bus, they mid block cross because to get to the nearest signal, it is a half a mile to a mile out of their way just to cross at a signal. And people are going to go the path of least resistance, which is usually straight across. So where do we go from here? And so I have just some photos, some things that I did in Houston, some photos from around my travels around the world to talk about, just to give us some ideas of how we can be better. So this is a photo from the city of Houston where we had a lot of crashes at the intersection. In addition, you had a lot of people walking at this intersection. There is a bigger project that is coming. However, transportation can be sometimes painfully slow, and we didn't want to wait for the project that is coming. So over the weekend, our traffic operations team and our planners went out and installed these devices. They're called K71s. They're very visible from far distances. They're pretty durable, although in this photo you can see one that didn't quite make it, which also gave us information about modifying the curb radius on the final design. But it also gave a shorter crossing distance for people to be able to get across the street. This project now is in construction where it will be a full bulb out like this and a narrowed roadway to make it safer. But part of the reason why we did this was to keep the community engaged and to show them that we are doing something and something is coming. But instead of waiting 2 years for that something to come, we're going to do something. And this intersection between uh, labor and materials was right about $20,000. This is an intersection in Houston that is on the high entry network. It's in a neighborhood called Gulfton, but we call it Little Ellis Island because it is a very, very, very heavily immigrant community. It's where a lot of people immigrate into the United States to get their start, and then they move to a different place of Houston from there. So it's well over 100 languages that are spoken, multiple cultures, religions, and often, many times, many people don't have access to a vehicle. And so they are depending on walking and bus in order to get around. But this is a very dangerous intersection. When we looked at the uh, the uh, the traffic volume, we saw that we just didn't need this many lanes of traffic. And so we went through and reduced it, installed a protected bike lane. We got a grant from Bloomberg Philanthropies to install the art because this community specifically said they wanted to see more art. And we were doing before, during, and after studies to get the data to understand that impact. Um, as you can see to the north, the bike lane stops, and you're probably like, well, the bike lane stops. But part of it, just out of frame, is a highway. And so the city did get a grant in order to study how to get people from this neighborhood to the other side of the highway. So there is more to come, and hopefully more traffic calming. I do want to talk about green infrastructure. So this is on the bottom. On the top is the before. It is a neighborhood in Third Ward in Houston. It is a low-income neighborhood where you have drainage ditches, you have flooding challenges. One of the things about Houston, it is a very flat city with clay soil. And clay soil might as well be plastic. You just don't get the seepage of water like you do with other types of soils. So we wanted to install sidewalks so that people could navigate this community. And we ended up doing a pilot program looking at porous concrete. We did an entire drainage system underneath the porous concrete just to be able to hold water, but then also provide a way for people to walk to the park. And so the entire drainage system, just in the sidewalks, is just over 800,000 cups of a Starbucks grande water. We do have videos from extreme weather events to show the impact. I will say that this costs 3 times more than a standard concrete sidewalk. In addition, the maintenance is the other part of it. So we did have to make sure to train our maintenance staff and that they could see it be installed, to just be able to monitor what it actually takes to maintain. But then from a holistic cost perspective, is it still a better value because we don't have to keep sending our teams out in order to maintain the ditches, the bioswales? So does it all kind of at the big picture, does it all work out? So that's a current pilot project. And then just aspirationally, some of my travels. So this is the Netherlands, and I know we all think about Amsterdam from a biking perspective and a biking city, but I actually took a picture of this street because it's a complete street. We saw that the U.S. version of a complete street was very car dominant. But here you have a complete street where it accommodates transit, it accommodates people on a bicycle. There's nice wide sidewalks for people to walk. There is parking and there's places for people to drive. And so you have a different vision and a different view of what can be a complete street. I know Gil is from Colombia, and I don't have a photo from Bogota, but I do have a photo from one of my favorite cities in Colombia, and that's Cali. And that's where they, instead of doing just bus only lanes, which what we see in the United States, taking over streets and just making them for buses, being able to move people through an inner city, in the inner part of the city within these buses. And then I'm going to end on Belgium. It is one of my favorite European cities. And particularly, I love this area where it's just people. It is a people oriented street. And for me, it was so interesting to navigate this portion of Brussels and to be actually able to window shop or to be able to sit in a cafe and not have the noise of vehicles. So I leave you with these so that you can have visions of what your city could be.
Veronica, we always want to end with you providing a call to action. You have a wonderful book, an amazing book. I highly recommend people on inclusive transportation. What is your call to action? Here you have people from Paraguay and from Mexico and from all over the US and Canada and Africa. Some are public health, others are mobility, others are. What is your call to action? What should all of these people that want to be passionate advocates, what do you recommend? What is your final message, loud and clear?
So, my final message is get engaged, whatever that looks like for your lifestyle. It might be just attending a public meeting and being a voice and bringing some residents with you. Bring 5 friends with you, or explain to 5 friends after the meeting and some of your neighbors what happened. I think 2, join a board, a commission, a committee. Almost every city, I don't know any city globally that doesn't have some type of something that you can join and lend your voice. Consider running for public office. Why not you? Why can't you be the person to be the next, alderman, councilman, county commissioner, mayor? Why can't it be you? So consider running for public office, and with all things, elect better people.
Wonderful. And also, people, if you participate, if you volunteer, it's going to be better for your city, but it's also going to be better for your mental health, for your physical health, for your emotional health. When people, the number one public health issue now, according in the places like the US and Canada, is loneliness. So when we volunteer, when we participate, and I totally agree with Veronica, on whatever you want. We, on this webinar series, we are not saying on what, on whatever hits your heart. If you want to promote tree planting, or you want to promote green places, or you want to promote safer intersections, whatever you want, but participate. Hey, let's make cities where we're going to be able to live healthier and happier, where everyone is going to be, all decisions are going to be focused, evaluated based on equity, sustainability, and health. Veronica, thank you very, very much. And everyone, I'll see you 2 weeks from today. And have a wonderful time in Washington, Veronica. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Veronica, thank you. Thank you very much. What an amazing presentation. You were so clear. You showed wonderful images of what to do, what to avoid, and what are the problems. You showed about inclusive transportation and some of the issues of how to repair divided communities, which is one of the main things on mobility, on transportation, talking about equity and sustainability and how to live healthier and happier. Thank you. I hope that everybody who's watching this recording will share it with their decision makers. Send it to the mayors, to city councilors, to the heads of transportation or parks, economic development, public health. And remember, every other Tuesday, we have it live. And we have both the presentation and then we have a 30-minute dialogue with questions from participants. The recording is only the presentation. So watch it, share it, and tell others about this webinar. And I hope that it will be useful as you and I and everyone strengthen our tools to be passionate advocates on creating better cities for everyone. Thank you.